In the spring of 2006, Russell Aylett was murdered in a small room at the YMCA. After his death, he somehow reached back from the grave, delivering a private message about angels that stopped his best friend cold. Here's my husband Damon with the details.
In the early 1990s, Romford in Essex, England was hopping with nightclubs, and Hollywood's on Atlantic Boulevard was one of the biggest and most iconic. It was loud, energetic, and a favorite for people near and far. It was a super club, if you will. Michael Paul was one of the nightclub's DJs, and by his own admission, he wasn't the world's most likable person.
Being a DJ, you live and die on your ego. You have to be the biggest ego in the room, and I totally get that. Looking back now, I probably wouldn't have liked me, to be honest with you.
It was here in this nightlife environment that he met a man named Russell Aylett, a man who would soon become his best friend, suffer a horrible murder, and then somehow reach back from the grave, impossibly repeating information that only the two of them knew.
I just started talking to him just a little bit at the start, not a great deal, but we gradually warmed to each other. And there was just something between us. I don't know what it was, but it was a meeting of the minds.
Michael said that this connection was extremely powerful and the closest thing to telepathy that he had ever experienced.
It's very strange. It was, I could look at him and he knew what I was thinking. It was very strange. It was, you've heard of telepathy. Well, this is possibly the closest thing that I've ever been to it.
Well, after their shifts ended, they would often return to Russell's place. They would stay up until morning, laughing, joking, just having a good time. Then one night, Russell began messing around with an ordinary deck of playing cards. Just goofing off, really. He asked a question, and to his surprise, the cards, well, they answered back.
Welcome to Velarcana. Here, we share mysteries that often defy explanation. I research the cases, and my husband tells the stories.
It was late one night, and Russell and Michael were together at Russell's place. Russell started messing around with a deck of playing cards. He would deal 4 cards face down, ask a yes or no question, and then flip each over one at a time.
Or 4 black cards would be a positive, 4 red cards would be a negative, and 2 and 2 would be a not sure.
Well, it started out as just a fun little game, but soon it grabbed their attention because it seemed as if every answer that was given was right. So the moment became fairly intense, and the two of them chose a question that they absolutely knew the answer to, and then Russell turned over the cards.
And it was right. It gave the right answer, yes. So I went, well, that's just fluke. It's going to happen. You do it long enough, it's just going to happen. So we shuffled the cards again. He went, bum, 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 asked another question, turned the cards over. It was the correct answer again. So I'm looking at this. I said, do it again. Every single time he done it, he asked the question, and it gave him the correct answer.
So as strange as this seemed, they began to believe that these cards were actually somehow giving them the correct answers. Well, after that, they moved on to asking questions about the future.
So we progressed from there to asking questions that we didn't know the answers to, something that was coming. And it would give us a few answers, and then we found out in 2 or 3 weeks later that the answers it was giving us were true.
Well, as you can imagine, they found all of this pretty mind-bending and extremely compelling. So they continued to do it, and eventually Russell found himself asking deeper spiritual questions about the nature of reality, and that led to a promise involving the afterlife.
And as we were doing the cards, he's laying them down, he's going, I wonder if there is an afterlife. So I said, oh, I don't know, mate, to be honest with you. I wonder if there's any angels. Do angels really exist? So I went, I've never read anything, being very material. Never read anything about anything like that, Russ. So he's going, all right, well, we'll make a deal now. Whoever goes first, and I'm getting goosebumps talking about this now. I always get emotional at this point. Whoever goes first You have to come back and tell the other person whether angels exist. So I went, I'm thinking, being a material person, yeah, right, all right, yeah, okay, that's going to happen, isn't it? I went, yeah, all right, mate, yeah, no problem.
Many years later, after Russell's horrific murder, that promise would come back and haunt Michael, and eventually it would have him questioning the very fabric of reality itself.
Velarcana.
Russell eventually moved to Spain to be closer to his mother, and he stayed there for over a decade. When he finally returned, he needed a place to stay while he looked for his own place, so Michael said that he could stay with him until he found one. Well, one day, Russell had lined up 3 different places to look at, and he and Michael went together. But due to a scheduling mix-up, they found themselves near the YMCA with just a little bit of time to kill. So Russell pointed across the street at the YMCA and said, "Why don't we try there?" When they walked inside and they asked if there were any rooms available, strangely, the lady at the front desk picked up a key and said, "Why, yes, just now one became available." As a matter of fact, the cleaning lady just finished cleaning the room and brought me the key just a few seconds before you walked through the door. Now, when Michael pondered this later, all of it seemed oddly peculiar, almost as if the day had been orchestrated somehow, as if fate, I guess, had had a hand in the way that the events had unraveled that day. Had there not been a scheduling mix-up, they would not have found themselves near the YMCA with time to kill. Had the last tenant not moved out when he did, there wouldn't have been a room available. And had the cleaning lady taken just a few minutes longer, the room would not have been viewable at that moment. Well, to make matters worse, Michael got this really bad feeling when they walked into the lobby, and it stayed with him as they were in the elevator on their way up to the room.
Okay, so we went up in the lift. I've still really got this bad feeling in the pit of my stomach, and I don't know why. I still don't know why. So we came out on the 6th floor, walked along. The guy that was with us opened the door and showed a very basic room, but it was all you wanted. You know, there was a bed in there was a wash basin.
After looking at the room, Russell said that he would take it. Michael still had a bad feeling, but feelings are just feelings, right? I mean, they don't really have any bearing on reality. Well, just a few short weeks after Russell moved into that room, on March 29th, 2006, Michael got a phone call.
And the phone rings, I picked it up, it was Russell. And as I was on the phone to him, I heard a knock on the door. So he went, "I've got to go, there's someone at the door."
That was the last time that Michael and Russell ever spoke. Saturday morning, April 1st, Michael received another phone call. It was the YMCA saying that they needed to speak to Russell about his rent, and they wondered if Michael had spoken with him. Well, Michael told them that he had not spoken with Russell since Wednesday night, but he would try to find him. He called Russell's phone, but there was no answer. Not long after this, Michael was at home when the phone rang.
All of a sudden, my phone rings. He said, "It's the Romford CID. Why aren't you answering your door?"
The CID, or the Criminal Investigations Department, had been standing downstairs banging on the front door, but Michael hadn't heard them. Well, Michael let them in, and a few moments later, they were all standing in Michael's living room, giving Michael the most terrible news.
He said, "It's about Russell Aylett. We've found a body." So I went, "Oh my God." And it was the weirdest feeling in the world. The room I was in felt tiny. It felt like it was compressing me. I've never had that feeling since. They said that he'd been killed on the Wednesday night.
When Michael heard that, his mind raced back to the phone call that he had had with Russell that very night, and a cold chill washed over him as he remembered Russell saying that he had to go because someone was at the door. Whoever it was that had been at the door that night had killed Russell just moments after Michael and he finished their phone call. Well, in the weeks that followed, Michael just couldn't stop thinking about the strange chain of events that had placed Michael in that room at the YMCA. the last-minute scheduling challenges, the sudden decision to try the YMCA across the road, the key that had seemingly been waiting at the front desk the very moment that the two walked in the door. Every step had lined up with this uncomfortable precision. It was almost as if Russell had been predestined in some way to be in that room on that particular night. Well, it was about a year after Russell's death when the orbs first appeared.
Velarcana.
Quite a while later, I was taking photographs of the nightclubs that I worked in because I was creating a website to try and sell my services to other clubs. And I started off seeing these little round circles of light. I'm looking at this, I'm thinking to myself, I don't know what that is, so I used to Photoshop them out.
At first, Michael really didn't think too much about these little round circles of light, except maybe that they were annoying. But the more that he photoshopped them out, the more they just kept coming back, and in greater numbers. He'd erase 2 from one photograph, and 4 would be in the next. Well, eventually things just got ridiculous, and a photo that he had taken one night out in the middle of nowhere was just riddled with these little round circles of light, or I guess orbs, if you will. He counted over 200 in that one photograph alone. Something strange was happening, and for some reason he felt as if he just might have some control over this. So he began asking for orbs to appear. A certain number, like 10. And then, just like magic, and this is enough to give me goosebumps, 10 orbs would appear. Well, he'd ask for another number, and then that exact number would appear. Well, not having any idea of exactly what it was that was happening, he approached a friend of his who was very heavily into photography and knew all about cameras.
He said, oh, it's dust on the back of the lens. I said, but I've been using more than one camera, and it's the same. So he said, I've taken thousands of photographs. I've never, ever taken a photograph of one orb.
Well, shortly after this, they were both standing in Michael's friend's studio, and to demonstrate that orbs just don't mysteriously appear on photographs, Michael's friend said that he would take some photographs of Michael with his own camera. But Michael's friend did not get the results that he expected.
First photograph came up. No orbs. He went, there won't be any orbs in this, Mike. He said, I don't know what it is. This is something that's going on with the camera. Second photograph, no orbs. He went, there won't be any. Third photograph, there was a dozen orbs, or thereabouts. And he went, oh.
Michael's friend just could not understand it. Eventually, he concluded that there has to be something about Michael that was making these orbs appear. Well, this and a few other things really got Michael pondering what in the world was happening with his life. So desperate for answers, he decided that he would go see a psychic, and he found a woman named Lorraine Reese. And at first, he was not impressed, but then she started talking about Russell and about his murder.
But she told me a lot about Russell. She told me the view from the window. And from Lorraine, because now I'm going, hey, hang on a minute, there's something not quite right here. I can't just accept that this all exists and she knows something that went on that she should never know.
But then she said that Michael's friend was actually there in the room with them. Apparently, he had come back to fulfill a promise, one that he had made many years ago when they were playing cards, because what she said next stopped Michael cold.
She went, oh, he's shouting something at me now, and I'm just going to tell you what he's shouting. It doesn't mean anything tonight to me, and I don't know if it will mean anything to you. So I said, all right then. She's telling me, she said he's shouting, angels exist. That was, and it gives me goosebumps every time I think of when she said that. It feels like it was a password. He'd come back and told me a password. Sorry. I still get very emotional about this.
In that same reading, perhaps to give Michael additional evidence that there truly is more to reality than what he thought, Lorraine went on to tell Michael that soon he would be receiving a phone call from someone he hadn't heard from in 20 years, and that person would be offering him a role in a movie.
And I went, yeah, of course, because I'm Romford's answer to Brad Pitt. She went, no, seriously, it's going to happen.
Well, after her statement about angels, Michael really didn't know what to think, but that didn't make it any less surprising when, just a short while later, he received a phone call from a man whom he hasn't spoken to in 20 years.
Velarcana.
About 2 weeks after Michael's reading with Lorraine, he received a phone call from a man named Steve. Steve? Steve who? At first, Michael didn't recognize him. Then Steve reminded him that they used to work together. And just as Michael was about to say, "Oh yeah, wow, what's it been? 20 years?" A cold chill ran down his spine, and all he could think about was how the psychic had told him that he'd be receiving a phone call from someone who he hadn't talked to in 20 years. Well, all of this was just a bit much, and in that moment, he knew exactly why Steve was calling.
And in the back of my head, I've got this voice going, he's going to say it. He's going to say it.
Well, sure enough, Steve asked Michael if he wanted to play the part of a radio announcer in an upcoming film. A short time later, Michael had another psychic reading. This time, he was told that Russell was there in the room with them again, and he was saying that he couldn't believe that they had actually killed him. Then the medium said something that Michael absolutely knew was wrong. She said that Russell was telling her that there had been 3 men in the room during the time that he was murdered. Well, Michael knew that this wasn't right, so he corrected her. No, there were just 2. But the psychic was adamant there had been an additional man, one whom Michael didn't know about, a man only known as Ralph, and she described him as running up and down the stairs, going away, coming back, going away, repeatedly. Well, that seemed highly unlikely, as Michael had invested himself deeply into the case. Russell had been his best friend. During his own inquiries, the police showed Michael images from the CCTV camera outside of the room, and it clearly showed Russell with 2 other men. And the police only brought charges against 2 men. But I guess not every psychic reading can be perfect, right? Well, by this time, filming on the movie had begun, and on a night shoot, Michael met one of the actors, a man named Errol, and they got to talking about how they both had ended up on the project. Errol said that his agent had helped him get the part. And then Michael, well, he told the strange story of how he had come to be involved through psychic mediums, predictions, and eventually he got around to mentioning the murder of his friend in the Romford YMCA. What? The Romford YMCA? At that, Earl's face completely changed. What happened? Well, Michael told him the story, and as he spoke, Earl became real quiet, and all of the blood drained from his face. Then Earl asked for the name of the man who had been killed. Well, Michael said it was Russell Aylett. Russell Aylett? And then he told Michael something that made the ground move beneath Michael's feet. Earl said, now, check this out. He had been staying in the room directly next to Russell's at the YMCA during the time that he had been murdered.
Velarcana.
Errol told Michael that he had went to the front desk repeatedly, urging them to check on the man next door because something wasn't right. Well, as he stood there, Michael just couldn't believe the coincidence. How was it that he was talking to the man who had been living next door to his best friend when his best friend had been murdered? This chance encounter had come about through a series of events that started with a psychic giving Michael a message from an old friend about angels. It were almost as if Michael was meant to be at this very place, at this very moment, talking to this man. And just then, Michael's mind flashed with the memory of the medium saying that there had been 3 men in that apartment. So, now, check this out. When he asked if Errol knew how many men had been in that room, Errol said, yes, there were 3. Well, Michael's stomach just dropped. This was way more than coincidence. What are the odds, right? Then he asked if Errol knew who Ralph was, and Errol said yes, he did. Ralph was one of the 3 men, adding that he didn't believe that the police had ever spoken with Ralph. Well, Michael asked about someone running up and down the stairs, going away, coming back, to which Errol explained that after 9 o'clock, all of the elevators were turned off, so the only way in or out was through the staircase. Ralph had been the one coming and going up and down the stairs. The information that the psychic had given Michael weeks earlier, information that she couldn't possibly have known anything about through any normal means, had been independently confirmed by a man who had been physically present in the room next door to Russell's when Russell had died. All of this eventually left Michael with no other explanation than there has to be way more to the universe than what we think. And somehow, some way, something is pulling the strings from behind the curtain. What exactly that was? Michael wasn't sure, so he began to research. Eventually, his research led him to consciousness, synchronicities, and ancient religions.
And they were all saying, thousands of years ago, this isn't real. Everything you see and feel and hear and touch isn't real. It's just a ride. It's a ride we go through. When the body ceases to function, we just go on to a different ride.
Before all of this, Michael was a hardcore materialist. If he couldn't see it, taste it, touch it, or feel it, well, then it just wasn't real. Now he believes that we are all living in some dreamlike reality. Everything that we think of as real is just made up of particles, and they themselves can't be regarded as real. Amy normally finds the cases that we share, but this case actually found us. Michael Paul is a professional, and he's worked with our channel in the past. When he found out what we do, he shared a paper with us that he wrote about these experiences. If you would like to read the full paper, we'll put a link in the description below. Michael is a very interesting person, and he comes across off of the camera just like he does on camera. Genuine, honest, and believable. But you guys know me. I have to ask, could there have been other factors at play with his experience? I'm sure that many would argue that the fulfilled predictions and the details Errol confirmed could be explained by coincidence, selective memory, or even the human need, maybe especially the human need to find meaning in tragedy. You know, when Michael was talking about the psychic, I couldn't help but think about that TV series, The Mentalist. If you haven't seen it, it's about a man who is so good at reading people that he can actually convince them that he truly can read minds. And I think that there are some psychics out there who do just that and are really, really good at what they do. Could Michael have been duped, maybe? You say, but Damon, how could the psychic have known about that question about the angels? And how could the psychic have correctly predicted that Michael would get a phone call from a man that he hadn't spoken to in 20 years, and that man would offer him a part in a movie? And to those questions, I have to say, you're right. This mystery really makes one ponder. doesn't it? A private promise made between two men alone that whoever died first would return with a message from beyond. A promise that was seemingly kept and relayed by a medium who had no way of knowing that that conversation had ever taken place. You know, on a side note here, assuming that Michael is telling the truth, what does that mean about angels? I guess that's a whole separate rabbit hole that we can get into at another time. If that's something you guys want to do, let me know in the comments below. The events in Michael's story seem to be too much to be coincidence. Specific details about the number of men in the room and one man's movement up and down the stairs given by the medium before they were independently confirmed by Errol, the man who had been there, and the strange chain of events that placed Russell in that room. All of this seemed to unfold with a kind of surgical accuracy that ordinary chance doesn't easily explain. In the end, I guess Russell kept his promise, and that promise changed a man's life. What if Michael is right? What if the reality that we all believe to be true is just a thin layer stretched over something far older, far more deliberate, and far more real than most of us could ever possibly imagine?
When Michael first contacted me about his experience, I tried to pigeonhole it. Was this about ghosts, angels, the afterlife, synchronicity, the nature of reality, the Matrix? After going back and forth with Michael for hours, I realized the answer was no and yes. And that made my head spin, because so often we try to divide the category of paranormal into subcategories. But really, the mysteries we cover on this channel are more like webs. Michael's story is really about the collapse and then the rebuilding of one man's worldview. After the death of his friend, Michael spent years reading, researching, traveling, trying to understand what happened to him. And that's what we're trying to do here at Velarcana. Not prove, not convince, but follow the evidence wherever it leads and ponder the questions that most people never stop long enough to ask. Now, I've got to tell you, Damon and I love making these mysteries for you. But we've got to be honest, it takes us both working full-time, researching, compiling, filming, editing, and other things to do it. And it's getting harder and harder to do that and keep the lights on, so to speak. We did the math, and we really need 25 more monthly members at the master's level on our Buy Me a Coffee site to bridge the gap. Every bit of support goes right back into research and production and keeps us working on these videos full time so that we can keep bringing the mysteries to you. We truly cannot do this without you. And whether you support us financially or simply by watching each week, thank you. Thank you for being a part of this wonderful family of truth seekers. We are more than grateful you're here. And as always, stay curious.